monsters, madness, and magic.
All right, folks, welcome to the Monsters, Madness, and Magic podcast. I'm your host, Justin, here with a quick word before we dive in. Now, in this episode, I chat with prolific artist Lee MacLeod to discuss his Nintendo Power Days, the grind of film poster work, painting iconic covers for full moon features, legendary video game art, and more. As always, thank you all for listening out there, and without further ado, here you go. All right, Lee. So, just take us back in time. You're a youngster. Would you consider yourself a book reader, fort builder, troublemaker, or all of the above?
I would consider myself a book reader.
Any authors or genres that you lean towards that pop into your head?
Um, well, it was funny. When I was a kid, I was really reluctant to read.
Mm-hmm.
Because I could look at the pictures in a book and I knew what Tip and Mitten were doing. So, Tip is running and Mitten is doing whatever. But then I discovered something called the Happy Hollisters. And that led me to Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew. And then finally I ran across Andrea Norton. And I pretty much became a Andrea Norton addict, and I read literally everything she wrote. And then I also fell into the Doc Savage. I had all those paperback books with James Bama covers, and read those religiously. So, and reread them all.
I have the entire Hardy Boys collection over there on the shelf. That was a big one for me growing up too.
Oh, really? Yeah.
So do you still read, or is it something that stuck with you?
I still read. I don't read as much as I should. I get busy and sometimes it's just difficult. I discovered that trying to paint and listen to a book at the same time is difficult for me, but driving is so that's when I usually try to catch up. My wife is a prolific reader, and I'm so far behind her at this point.
So, I've read some of your written interviews, and you've mentioned that that you were a fan of Frazetta and folks like Boris Vallejo. Where does that begin?
I think the Frazetta probably began when from the paperback book covers.
Yeah.
That he had, done, and I read all the Conan books, and yeah, all that stuff was fascinating for me. I mean, I discovered Boris through the book covers as well, and then eventually his calendars and all the artists who kind of worked on even the Marvel comic. Barry Smith and all those guys. They were, I was just a fan of all of it.
Gotcha. So whereabouts did you grow up, man?
I grew up in Pasadena, California, and then my family moved down to San Diego. So I grew up in from high school on, I was in North County, San Diego.
Gotcha. Now, can you point to maybe parents or someone in your family that was artistically, creatively inclined? Is that where your roots come from with painting?
I think probably my mom.
Mm-hmm.
She was an interior decorator, but she was actually she could really draw. She didn't do it that often, but every so often she would, whip something out, and I was always going, "Oh my goodness, this is so much better than anything I could do." But it was sort of a challenge as well. I think the other thing too, my parents had this great way of distracting us so that they could, sit down for a cocktail before dinner without, the kids totally interrupting. So they would draw squiggles, and then myself and my brother and my sister would spend hours or 2 hours just trying to create things from these squiggles.
Mm-hmm.
And we were all three very into it. So it worked out perfectly well. They kept us out of their hair.
Well, just curious, are either your siblings, do they do any creative work or anything like that?
My brother does not. He should. He's a professional horse trainer and judge. And my sister, who is, kind of the financial person in our
Mm.
family, is
Gotta have one.
yeah, exactly. Once again, pretty, she's talented. I mean, they occasionally will, they do have paint boxes and they occasionally do take a art seminar here or that, something along those lines, but it's kind of rare. And but they're both pretty talented, and I think that sometimes I wish they put a little more time and effort into it.
Yeah.
But I
So,
also understand it's hard. If it's not your first love,
yeah, yeah. So when you think about the formative films and TV shows you grew up on, what pops into your head?
Oh gosh, I'm gonna date myself. The original Star Trek, Time Tunnel. Um, one, gosh, there was one about the submarine. Um, I'm blanking on its name off the top of my head, but it was, very similar to Time Tunnel. They were in a sub and they were always being attacked by aliens or getting swept into some time loop or something.
Okay. Well, Twilight Zone fan?
I know I very much like Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
And the one I think the most powerful one of all the Twilights, it still haunts me, is the one where the guy is finally free to read books and then drops his glasses
Mm,
I've always had terrible eyes. I'm kind of pushing what contacts can do at the moment, and so I really related to that.
yeah. I love the Twilight Zone. One of my personal favorites, I don't know if you remember it, is The Howling Man
Oh yeah,
with the Hermitage and they have the Devil
yes,
Trap. Yeah, that's one of my personal
yeah,
favorites.
we're all really great.
Yeah. Just admire Rod Serling because outside of just being the on-screen personality, he was the writer. He pretty much wore all the hats, and that's just mind-boggling.
Yeah, I know. Um, it's incredible how talented some of those guys were and just how much everybody owes them for all the stuff that's come after.
Yeah. Uh, so, do you remember the first movie that you saw in theaters? Was that a formative experience for you?
Um, my parents took me to a lot of Disney movies.
Mm-hmm.
So Swiss Family Robinson comes to mind. That darn cat. Probably, and then when I got older, I went with a friend and his parents to see, gosh, the Bad and the Ugly. I think it was, and a big screen. It was impactful. And then I think 2001: Space Odyssey was probably the ultimate movie I saw as a kid that just, you know, swept me away.
Yeah. And I'm just curious because I keep staring over your shoulder. Are those some antique weapons you have on the wall there?
Those are derringers.
Okay.
They're women's. They were kept in a women's purse in the 1800s and early 1900s, and my wife's mother collected them, and we still have them. And I always forget they're there. And occasionally, and it's rare. I don't do a lot of Zoom calls or anything like that,
Hmm.
but inevitably someone says, "Are those guns behind you?" I'm going, "Yes." Uh, I find it highly unlikely that they can even fire. I think the ammunition is no longer made, but uh, but they are very interesting.
Yeah, that's why I kept looking at them. And is that custom woodwork on that door behind you? Is that something you did or?
No, I live in this unusual house here in Santa Fe, and the builders were kind of artists,
Okay,
and,
yeah, I can tell.
and so every house, every door in my house has fleur-de-lis like this, and
Okay.
they also have this. They're slider, so
Wow.
they open and they built like four other houses in my neighborhood, And then each time they used a different symbol, fleur-de-lis here, but the Zia symbol and others. Um, yeah, that was their big thing.
Yeah, it's striking. It kept drawing my attention behind you. I'm like, man, that's just a cool looking door.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like I'm wearing a crown. I think about it.
So Lee, which records were spinning around the house when you were growing up? What kind of music did you grow up on?
I grew up on, well, I think the new Christy Minstrels. I mean, Lawrence Welk. I mean, that was a big deal. We would watch Lawrence Welk all the time as a family.
Hmm.
And then my older sister was into Everly Brothers, and then Johnny Cash for some reason. My parents loved Johnny Cash, and so it was very eclectic.
Yeah.
And ultimately, when I started looking at music for myself, I mean, I was as a kid. I think some of the first things were Gordon Lightfoot, a lot of rock, but soft rock, more kind of country and rock mixed.
Okay. Did you ever pick up an instrument yourself?
No, no. Well, I did pick up one, and they took it away from me. Uh, I in school we were required to take a musical instrument, and so I played the cello for 2 weeks, and then the music teacher decided I was better off in study hall, and so that was the end of my musical career. I like music, and I am totally incompetent when it comes to playing anything.
We're in the same boat. Were you a big concert goer ever? Going to live shows or anything like that?
A little bit during college. Pre-college, not so much. But in college, Pink Floyd and
Ooh.
Emmylou Harris. I mean, once again, all over the map.
Hmm.
Um, saw Gordon Lightfoot live in. No, it was there was a lot of I saw a lot of different concerts then and a few after. But yeah, primarily, I listen to music in the studio.
Hmm.
In fact, it's almost impossible for me not to listen to music in the studio. I have to have something going on.
Yeah, just about that. Does it have to fit what you're trying to work on, or does that not matter?
No, they're kind of all yeah. And again, my music collection is very eclectic. But my wife accuses me of having too many sad songs, but uh, other than that, no, it's kind of all over the map.
Gotcha. So a question I like to ask everyone is, what scared you as a kid?
I was convinced there were snakes under my bed.
That's scary.
Uh, yeah. So um, we had a nightlight in the bathroom, and it had created a trail from the bathroom to my bed, and I felt obligated to run down the lights and jump into the bed so that I wouldn't, so the snakes wouldn't get me. And and even though I knew it was kind of silly, I, I it took years for me to not do that. When I was really little, I mean, I was convinced.
I think you said you grew up in Southern California. They have rattlesnakes in Southern California, don't
Yes, yes,
they? Yeah.
but I had never, run into a rattlesnake. Probably the only snake I'd ever seen was in a terrarium or something. Um, I'm one of those, there's some people that are afraid of spiders, and spiders don't bother me at all.
No,
And
me neither.
snakes, on the other hand, I just, I intellectually know they're very important and, ecologically and everything else, but they're just not my favorite animals.
Yeah, I think it's more of the visual thing with snakes, and
Yeah,
there's all sorts of symbolic nature that goes along with snakes that are like
yeah,
evil and whatnot.
right, right. Yeah, no, when I was a little kid and learned that in Ireland there were no snakes, I was going, why don't we live in Ireland?
So I think generally speaking, most of us draw, paint, what have you when we're kids, doodle, if not for just school, just playing around. But when you was there someone that encouraged you and let you know, hey, you've got something a bit beyond, like a typical kid scribbles here?
Um, I think I had good art teachers all the
Hmm.
way through, and they were very encouraging. And I had a really good friend who was, my just a year older than me, but excellent artist. And we spent a vast amount of every summer together just drawing things. Um, ships and monsters, dragons, and you name it. But I mean, it was sort of like a little bit of a contest, but not really. I mean, we had a lot of fun together,
Yeah.
and he would, I mean, he just. I think I got encouraged by just how much fun I had doing it.
Like you said, you were a fan of Rosetta and such from the book covers. Was there any attempts by you when you were young to try to emulate the things you were a fan of, or was it just
Oh yeah,
yeah?
yeah. No, one of the artists I used to copy all the time was Jim Steranko,
Hmm.
a Marvel artist. I really liked. He had sort of a little more stylized than some of the other artists, and I was really fascinated by him. So I was constantly copying characters out of comic books, stuff like that.
So as you're growing up and getting better, was there a point that you can remember where you decided, this is what I'm going to pursue? I'm going to go to college for this, try to make a career out of it.
It's really interesting. I I knew I wanted to be a art major, and I got to college, and I discovered that I could get away with not doing a whole lot as an art major in college, and so I think what really I graduated, and then I suddenly really was confronted by, all right, exactly what are you going to do now? And that's when I really put my nose to the grindstone. I applied to Art Center College of Design out in California, and this was after my 4 year stint, and got accepted. And that was a hard school, a lot of work, and that's where I think it really came together for me.
Mm. So what is your first professional job as an artist that you landed after college?
It was a calendar. It was an U.S. Olympic calendar, and I did paintings of the equestrian events. And it was kind of interesting because I didn't choose; they chose it for me. But I had a background with horses because that was something my family did, and not specifically, jumping and some of the eventing and other things that they wanted in illustration. But I had access to people who knew about it, so I was able to, find reference and actually pull off a decent job. I really floundered if it had been, something else. And the calendar was kind of designed to be more unique, not running, and it was more like kayaking.
Mm.
A friend of mine got kayaking, and I was going, "Oh, I'm glad I didn't get kayaking." I never even seen a kayak other than on TV briefly. So
So do you have a personal preference? I mean, obviously, when you do this for a job, you take the work, you get paid. But just saying you're having fun, do you, as an artist, do you prefer like the more fantasy based things or more
yes,
realism? Yeah, yeah, it's more fun.
I definitely prefer the fantasy.
Mm.
And when I would do, work that, like in between jobs, a lot of times you'd have an idea and you'd think, oh gosh, maybe I can make this, a portfolio piece or something. It was inevitably fantasy of some sort, sci-fi fantasy.
Hmm. So I've spoken with several artists, and it's always there's certain bits that they struggled with early on, like usually very niche things like drawing hands or something like that. What
Hands
was
are
that for
hard.
you? Yeah.
Hands are hard. Hands and feet are difficult.
What
Uh,
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
And also capturing a likeness is not, and that was, I did a lot of my early stuff was movie comps, and whoever the actor was, Tom Selleck or somebody, it had to look like Tom Selleck, and you didn't have a lot of time to pull it together. So that was always a struggle.
Yeah, so I'm not an artist at all. Like you probably hear all the time. I can't draw a stick figure. So to layman's like me, what makes hands and feet so difficult to a lot of artists?
They're complicated the way they move.
Hmm.
They're just all the digits and proportions, and just the way the hand operates. It's funny. I mean, you'll be I'd be drawing something up and I'd be going, wait, I'm putting the left hand on the right hand of this guy. It just it's funny how that's a tricky one for a lot of us.
Yeah. So just generally speaking, again, when you're working on let's not say a commission, something for yourself, is there a final image in your head that you're working to put on the canvas or paper or whatever, or does it shift over time and you just go with the flow?
Oh, I'm kind of both.
Mm.
I mean, I have an idea but then every once in a while something happens and you go, oh, that looks pretty cool. I think maybe I should go that direction with this. And so that was always, that happy accident that uh, could be kind of cool. But I
So
usually had a pretty good idea of where I wanted to go.
cool. So obviously, you've done your fair share of work for movie releases. How'd you find your way in that realm?
Um, it was primarily when I got out of Art Center, which was located in Pasadena, California. Hollywood was close by. I had some of my instructors had good connections, and they were really helpful about, saying, "Go see this guy, go see that guy," and that's basically what you did. And it was, I'm more of a hide in the garret kind of guy. So I really had to, it was like stare at the phone and go, okay, I can make this call and then try to set up an appointment and show up for the appointment with your portfolio. And I did a lot of that initially. And then I got very lucky in the sense that I was contacted by a pretty high-powered art rep in LA who worked with a lot of the studios, and she got me into a lot of jobs, and we had a great relationship uh, for a number of years.
Was E.T. the first one? Am I wrong?
ET was one of the first big ones I worked on. I think I can't remember if Batman came before ET or ET was before Batman, but the first Batman, I
Yeah.
have to look that up. But those were all through a company, Brian Fox, BD Fox and Friends, which was located in Hollywood. And at the time, they hired a lot of design studios, who in turn hired illustrators. And we did a lot of comprehensive work. And then, sometimes you get to finish and sometimes you wouldn't. But
Hmm.
and then I think the big finish was Howard the Duck
Okay.
at the time. Um, and that probably wasn't the world's greatest movie, but I think it was made before. They just didn't really have the special effects
Right.
at the time, um, but it was it was released with a lot of fanfare, and I always remember getting a phone call from a friend who goes, "Hey, you got to come down here to Hollywood. There's a billboard and it was the Howard the Duck beat with a cigar, and it actually there was like smoke came out of the it was 3D and smoke something that looked like smoke came out of the cigar, and
Wow.
it was huge. And I'm down there taking pictures and thinking, wow, I've really made it. And then a couple of years later, my rep was saying, I think I'd take this out of your portfolio. It, you know, it's not that the art isn't good. It's just the movie didn't go anywhere. And I went, okay.
Yeah, just sticking on that, when you're dealing with these, these major releases, what would you say is the typical turnaround that you have?
Comps were done, gosh, sometimes they were done overnight.
Wow.
It was crazy. Color comps, you get lucky, maybe you get the weekend, and finishes about the same.
Jeez.
You got 4 or 5 days to pull this thing off. Book covers and a lot of other things have much longer deadlines, and consequently were in many ways easier. But the movie business was tough, and I can see why they went to computers when the computer became viable because the turnaround time was just so fast.
Now, were you given, how much material are you given to build off? Are you just given stills and images? That's
Stills,
really it?
yeah, stills and usually art direction. For the Howard the Duck, it was kind of interesting. I would say that's probably the one of the ones where I had the most influence on how the imagery actually finally came out. My comp that they assigned me, the entire one sheet was an egg. You didn't see the outside shape of the egg, and then the beak was coming through with the cigar. And very last minute, I took a overlay and created airbrushed a shape so that it looked like he was coming out of the egg that you could actually tell was an egg. And it was too small for him to really fit inside, and that's why they didn't want me. That's probably why they didn't assign it in the first place. But I just, to myself, it just looked better, and so when I brought it in, I said, "Look, I also did this overlay," and in the long run, that's what they went with.
Hmm.
So I've always sort of patted myself on the back on that one because I actually got to contribute from an art direction standpoint.
Is there much room at all for revisions, or do you have to pretty much nail it or they move on?
Oh no, there was lots of revisions.
Okay.
I did. Oh gosh, there was a movie. I can't remember her name. She's a woman drag race driver, and the film was called Heart Like a Wheel. And the image, she's wearing a helmet, and there are all these logos on the helmet. And then, I turned it in. Everyone said, "Oh, this looks great." And then I got the call. Sorry, but she's now, has all these different sponsors, and you have to replace a lot of these logos. And so it was airbrush out all the old logos and then paint in the new logos. So, and that's where you can see how with the computer, a guy could just go back in layers and drop in the new logos, and everything was done. It could have been done by the art director. But so that was staying up all night trying desperately to pull this off kind of thing.
Yeah, and from your perspective in the industry, when does that shift to more digital work happen? And did you ever delve into that yourself?
I did not. I was very slow to move over to digital. It's kind of interesting. I kind of went through periods. Initially, I did a lot of movie work, then not so much after a while, and it became game art.
Hmm.
And then I did a lot of game art and some book covers, and then finally it was just all book covers. And so at the sort of the culmination of my career, I was primarily just doing book covers and occasional ads for, I mean, things that were, coming through my New York reps that were totally out of the blue, like Blue Diamond Walnuts or, you know, something, that really didn't relate to the book cover thing at all. But I was always happy to get those just because they were different.
Just curious. Now, this may be a stupid question, but is there any form of residuals for artists, or is it just a one-time thing?
I think now maybe that probably there may be a residual, at least for book covers, there kind of was. If let's say Europe, a publishing house picked up a book cover you'd done for one of the American publishers, they usually paid for it. It wasn't as much as the original, but they, and they kept track of all that themselves, and it was great because every once in a while, a check would appear out of nowhere, and you realize it got used in, Hungary or something. So it
That's
was,
always nice.
yeah, that was always nice. But there was, for movie art and things like that, there were never residuals. You basically, sometimes they let you keep the originals, rarely. Usually they wanted the originals as well. There were some artists who were incredibly good at negotiating all that. Drew Struzan, for instance, he got paid a lot of money up front, and he got paid a lot of money for his art, for the art. And then there were, other artists like myself that were just so happy to get the job that, uh, and we got paid well, that I didn't feel like, okay, yeah, I don't, I need to get this art back. The only one I ended up with out of all of them was Howard the Duck. And that was because it came back for a revision, and then they decided not to revise it.
Mm.
So it lived in my flat file for years. And then Lucasfilm tracked me down and said, "Hey, what would it take to get this?" And I said, "Gosh, I don't know. What would you offer?" And they offered a lot of money. And I went, "Oh, it's yours for
Here you
sure."
go.
Yeah. And they sent a truck with a driver and a guy, and they came from LA to Santa Fe and picked it up and wrapped it up. And it, I guess, hangs at Skywalker Ranch. I think it was one of the few pieces of artwork that Lucas did not have from all the different films that he made.
Wow.
Now it's there. If I'd negotiated better, I would have also negotiated for a chance to go to Skywalker Ranch and see them. But I didn't think of that until too late.
Maybe you can retroactively put that on the
Yeah,
table.
yeah.
So, Lee, I grew up a big horror fan. So some of my favorite works of yours came from Full Moon Studios, and I've read a lot of written interviews with you, and it was surprising to me that you said that that was one of your favorite studios to work with.
Yeah, Charlie Band and I got along really well, and he was a total comic book guy, and and so I don't know, we just related on a lot of different levels, and I was lucky in that I got paid. Uh, because there were some guys who, there's always some stories that
There is.
an actor here or somebody there, but and no, it was a great relationship, and strangely enough, I got to, Tim Thomerson. He'd come to my studio because he and pose for stuff, and it was great. I really did enjoy working with him.
Charlie is one of the most interesting figures in film history. He's kind of like a like a Roger Corman light.
Yes. Yeah.
The guy has a castle. He's making all these movies, and then there's these stories about him.
Right.
He's just so interesting.
Yeah, and it was interesting because I think I first started working with him at Empire Productions. I think
Hmm.
that was the first iteration of his film companies, and then ultimately Full Moon. And I did a lot of art for him for Full Moon over the years, and it continued into even after I moved out of LA, over to Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I currently live. But I think at a certain point, Charlie missed meeting with me directly, and this the whole FedEx thing, because at the time that was part of how everything was done. It wasn't sent, it wasn't scanned and sent. It was literally packed up and sent. And I think I just sort of made myself slightly too unavailable by having moved. But I certainly enjoyed, working with him as long as I did.
Yeah, it just seems like most of the movie work is done, through secondary agents or what have you. Was this one of the only times that you were hands on with the head honcho creative guy?
Yes, just that it was that was one of the things that was kind of special about that relationship. I started working with him through an outside company, and then Charlie wanted to meet with me, and ultimately I was just working direct. The outside company was still doing all the type and everything, and so we were all working kind of together as a group. But I would meet with Charlie and come up with. He would give me direction, and I'd come up with comps, and I'd go to finish, and I, be in conversation with the other people to make sure I left enough room for type and all that kind of thing. But,
What do you remember specifically, if anything, about the subspecies cover? That's one of my personal favorites.
um, well, the very first one
Yeah, the first one.
where the girl's being carried,
Yeah.
that one, yeah. Well, that so the very first iteration of that one, the thing that the girl was a great model, and one of the reasons she was such a great model was that she was a great artist herself, and an illustrator, and now makes a very good living as a fine artist. But she was willing to do these silly things. It wasn't like sometimes even when working with professional models, they go, I don't want to crouch under the table. I mean, and you're going, that's what I need. And so she was great about that. And in the very first iteration of that, before it went to the final, I got to use my sister lives in Florence, Italy. And she lives outside of a little town called Casciano that had this, and her house dates back to, it's an old house.
Hmm.
Dates way back. And I was able to use the house as the background sort of castle-y, which was kind of fun.
So, another one that just comes to mind, just trying to go through all of them in my head, is the Puppet Master.
Yeah.
Now, were you just given the idea by Charles and then he let you go? How did that work?
Yeah, so the very first Puppet Master, he had an idea, and I produced a black and white comp, and then there was a finished art, and then oh, I'm gonna blank on his name, which is really bad. Last name is Allen, the special effects guy that worked with Charlie all the time. Anyway, they designed the actual puppets,
Hmm.
and once the puppets were actually designed, then the final poster was created using those puppets. And I got the puppets came to my studio, and I got to pose them and photograph them, and all the puppet masters I got to oftentimes work with them. And there are multiple versions of, say, six shooter and pinhead, but that they always gave me access to ones that could move, and that was really great as far as setting up the imagery.
Did you ever watch any of the movies that you worked on? Did you watch them all?
You're going to think I'm like,
I'm
no,
not going to judge you.
no. It's funny. Well, the same thing is with the game art.
Hmm.
I never played any of the games that I did the art for. And I probably did, 50 games, some of which were kind of big in the gaming world. I just never really had time. When all that was going on, I had two little kids, with, both daughters who were quite young, and I was constantly busy with new projects. And so I just, for whatever reason, I think Prehysteria, which is one that Charlie picked up, which is a dinosaur kind of appropriate kid movie, is the one that I saw because it was, because I had little kids.
Yeah.
And so, the other horror stuff, I was like, they can't watch that. So if they didn't watch it, I didn't watch it. I was busy watching Disney princesses.
So, have you had any contact with him since you guys worked together?
We had a phone conversation one time. He called up and he said, "Hey, would you like to do, a piece for me?" And I said, Charlie, this is going to sound terrible, but I don't have all the equipment anymore that I used to use to do this stuff. Everything I worked with for him was airbrush, and there was a lot of, it was all acrylic paint. All I own nowadays is oils, and I don't have an airbrush. I mean, I do primarily landscapes. Every once in a great while, I do some sort of fantasy thing, and it's usually for my grandchildren. I just really didn't have the wherewithal to do it anymore. Um,
I'm sure if you put that out there, some Full Moon fans would have sent you some materials.
yeah, so yeah, so that was I mean, it was a nice conversation, but
Yeah.
that was sort of it.
I'm sure you're aware in some capacity, but those are really some of the iconic early 90s, late 80s horror covers because Full Moon is one of those cult classic studios. So you did great work, man. Just got to tell you that.
Yeah, well, thanks. And like I said, I did enjoy doing it,
Hmm.
and I had a good relationship with Charlie and with all the people who did the special effects, and so and so they gave me access to all kinds of things that might not otherwise not have had.
Yeah, in the digital age, it's kind of lost on younger people, but when you had to go physically to the movie store back in the day, that the box art was more important than anything because you got to pick it up first before you rent it.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
and
exactly.
you helped sell a lot of Full Moon movies.
So I mean, I've been contacted by collectors over the years, and Charlie hung on to almost all the artwork,
Hmm.
and that was. I mean, I think in some ways Charlie was more interested in the final artwork than he was in the final film. He framed everything; it was on the walls. It was amazingly flattering to go in there because so many of the pieces were mine, and it was fun that he was so excited about them as well. And I know he's been selling off some of the art and everything, but I do get contacted by collectors. Do you still have it? No, no, I think but a couple of people had gotten work that and they sent it to me and I signed it and then sent it back that he had that they had purchased through Charlie.
Yes, I
So
think you said Howard the Duck was the only movie work that you had at one point.
that was, yeah, pretty much it.
Gotcha. So let's talk about how you sort of transitioned to video games. I think was it Deathbringer was your first video game?
That was one of the very first ones.
Okay.
The video game thing became a big deal, kind of. It's funny, when you were talking about, and I was going, oh yeah, I did games. Well, then of course, there was that big video game period where everyone was re-releasing everything, and everything from the Blob to early Telly Savalas westerns to Charles Bronson. These everybody was just hopping on that bandwagon, and they needed new art, and it kept a lot of illustrators in LA very busy, and they were a lot of fun to work on. But you'd get the assignment, and then in those days, it was kind of pre-internet, searches. So you'd go down to these old movie houses and where you collectible places and go through all the photos that had been taken, on the sets of some of those, because they had all that stuff. And then you'd find a good picture of Charles Bronson and go, okay, good, this is going to work. Because otherwise, they said, oh, it's Charles Bronson. I'm going, well, that's nice, but I can't draw Charles Bronson out of my head.
Can't
I need,
Google it.
I need reference, and I can't Google
Yeah.
it because Google wasn't around.
No, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but I think it was the Deathbringer cover where they instructed you to emulate the Boris Vallejo Edgar Rice
Yes,
Burroughs. Okay,
yes, yes.
that must have been easy. Well, I don't want to say easy, but exciting
Right.
because you were a
Yeah,
fan. Yeah.
yeah. So that was, yeah, no, that was great. And years later, I did. There was a company called Cards that did these collectible cards, and they also did cards with Julie Bell and with Boris. and they had all three of us at the San Diego Comic Con one year, and we all went to dinner afterwards, and that was when I got to meet Boris and Julie, and you know, I was trying really hard not to look too starstruck because I was feeling very starstruck.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to interview Julie. She's very nice. Have
She's,
not had a chance to talk with Boris. I don't know if I could do
yeah,
it.
he's a great guy. He was nice, and Julie is such a talent. She really is.
Yeah, she's a giant, really.
Yeah. I mean, her art, her fantasy art and sci-fi art is fantastic, but she also can paint animals, just unbelievably beautiful paintings of wildlife.
hmm Just curious, since we're just talking about artists, are you a fan of Michael Whalen at all?
Oh, yeah. I think I have pretty much every book that he ever published or was published about him. Yeah, no, I think Michael Whelan is a giant as far as I'm concerned. I love a lot of. I mean, I bought a lot of books just from his covers. I
Yeah.
didn't end up reading them, but it was the fact that they had his covers that made me pick them up in the first place.
So, can you talk a bit about how you came to work with Nintendo Power Magazine?
They contacted me,
Mm.
which was, kind of a surprise. It, yeah, they were at the time working out of Redmond, Washington, and an art director called up and said, "Hey, we'd be interested in having you do this art for us. You got recommended um, because of the cover you'd done for something. There was a company called Moore and Price. There's a gentleman named Denny Moore was one of the heads, and I think he had passed my name on. So I did a piece for them, and they were really happy with it. And then I kept getting work, and pretty much until I think they moved the company back to Japan. Um, I think they kind of downsized what they had going on. But up until then, I did a lot of work with them, and definitely enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun, and it was interesting because uh, like I said, I hadn't played these games,
hmm
so but the descriptions of the games, and then they'd send you shots taken from the game itself, and so you could usually put together something that was going to work.
Yeah. And I think your last video game was 2005. Is it?
I think so, yeah. In fact, I can tell you. Hold on here. I kind of put these little books together for myself of what I'd done. When I say for myself, I think primarily for the grandkids. And somewhere I have game art. So I think, yeah, I think the final game art that I know that I did um, was for Sound of Thunder, which
Yeah.
was Game Boy. So,
It was
and
that.
that was one price.
Yeah. Would you say that was similar to sort of what happened with movies where things going digital? What was the or just
Yes,
yeah?
I
Okay.
would I would think it was primarily things going digital. The quality of the artwork that the games, when the games first came out, our artwork was far superior to the imagery in the games. But the imagery in the games became so incredibly strong at a certain point that there was no real reason necessarily to use a lot of outside artwork. They could draw from the games themselves and enhance things. And the guys who designed that stuff were uh, equally great artists, so they could produce stuff in house that would work.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember it specifically because you've done so much, but uh, video game franchise that I grew up on was Final Fantasy, and I could just picture that artwork in my head. What were some of the influences or stills they gave you to do that one?
It's funny with Final Fantasy. there was primarily description.
Okay.
This is what the main character looks like. You know, he carries, this is his defense, and this kind of thing. And for the Final Fantasy, a lot of the times I use myself as the model. And I had gone over, this is once again a thing we would do. I went over to Hollywood and there was these huge rental places where you could get costumes and everything. And I would rent costume and came up with that costume and posed myself and, holding I think it was a broom handle or something, but, uh, so but that was a great, I mean, that was one of they gave me a lot of leeway. Once I'd done the first one, as long as I stayed within that look,
Yeah.
um, they were, of course, there was a sketch stage, so there was a lot of input, during the sketch stage before going to the final art.
And I know you don't, you said you don't play the games, but just in case you're not aware, the work that you did do are on some of the biggest, like Final Fantasy, Street Fighter, Castlevania. Those are AAA video game big time releases.
Yeah, and I did kind of learn once, I got contacted by collectors of the game, and they love the artwork, but they're also collecting because of the importance the game had for them,
Yeah.
and it was really interesting. And a lot of times I did have that art. Most of it that was returned, so it's all found its way to. At the moment, I have nothing left, but all of that art has disappeared off into collector land.
Hopefully they paid you well.
I got to, it's gone up in price. I've noticed since they bought it from me. But back then, it was I was thrilled and it had a good home.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things. Also, I mean, I got paid decently, and it went to good homes and people who appreciated it. And I didn't want to end up, at some point passing away and getting and the kids, my daughter's looking at all this game art, going, "What are we going to do with this stuff?"
Yeah.
So, so it worked out well.
Right. So Lee, out of all the film projects you've worked on, which could you pinpoint as the most challenging for you? Caused the most headache, I guess.
Yeah. Gosh. Uh, I'd say the original art that was for Batman, it was just the logo, and the final, it was just cutting those friskets, all those arcs, and then the type. I just didn't consider myself a lettering guy. I mean, at the time, there were some amazing lettering guys. But of course, instead of saying, "Oh, I don't think I should do this," it was like, "I've got to find a way to do this because this is, Batman." And um, but boy, I just remember just working on that forever because you cut out these things with X-Acto knives, so it
Yeah.
was careful, brisket cutting. Drove me crazy.
I assume you never got that one back.
No. And then, interestingly enough, the final has some highlights and other things that a different artist actually put on it. That was not 100% uncommon in those days. And that art remains probably, with the film director or something.
Yeah.
That was still exciting and fun to be part of that whole project. I just remember though, just pulling my hair out.
Was that a 1 day turnaround thing?
That was a couple of days. Yeah, yeah. I think I ended up having 2 or 3 days to put that together.
Ugh.
And the reason that, and then they wanted to send it back for the highlights. Oh, can you put a glowing highlight here, and can you do this and that? And I'm going, guys, it's Christmas. And they said, well, we have a guy that'll do it. And I went, okay. I was going, okay, thinking I'm relinquishing this now. But I actually, at the time, I don't think they realized that they were going to use it. And
Hmm.
yeah, I think it was still sort of in the comprehensive phase. And then everyone said, "Oh, let's run with this. This is great." Um, and it was funny because when it was actually up as a poster, it was all over the place. It's sort of a before in anticipation of the Batman movie coming out. People had a little trouble reading it. Some people said, "Is that a mouth?" And I was going, "No, it's Batman's logo." So I thought it was, but I don't know. Some people afterwards, people are saying, "Oh, it was so fascinating because we weren't quite sure what it was, and that was really brilliant." And I'm going, I don't think it was intentional at all. I just think no one who was working with it saw it in any other way than it was because we were so familiar with it.
And just thinking about it, hearing you talking about the logistics of the whole thing is fascinating. Looking back at the time period too, because just like how you say the art went digital, now there's no email. You can't scan the file, upload it, and then they send you the notes back, and you would do it from
Right,
home. Everything has to be mailed,
right,
snail
right.
mailed.
Mailed, or in the case at the time, so book covers were all FedExed back and forth. Yeah, when I was doing a lot of the film work and even the video game work, a lot of that it was hop in the car at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and get over there to pick up the job at BD Fox and Friends or at design company in Encino or wherever it was, and it was inevitable when the freeways were just jam packed, and you're going, oh, couldn't you have called it 10 in the morning? There was a chance I could get here in less than 2 hours.
So what are you doing mainly now? Are you just commission work?
I'm do primarily landscape work.
Hmm.
I'm with a gallery in Fredericksburg, Texas, and I'm in a gallery here in Santa Fe. And it's almost all landscape, Southwest primarily, and then I have been lucky enough to, and there's some very kind of important fine art shows, Oil Painters of America, California Art Club, and I've been lucky enough to get into a lot of those shows. So with which often results in sales. So that's sort of how I stayed busy, and I really do enjoy this.
Hmm.
Uh, I think the Arizona, Santa Fe area, New Mexico, Colorado. We have wonderful landscapes, and I do enjoy painting.
Now, people that listen to this are going to want me to ask this. So, are you open to commissions?
I have done a couple.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. A couple. I've recreated a couple of the game pieces. And but as I, and it those went well, but the reality is, as I told them, they're going to look similar, but they're not going to look the same because one, like I said, I don't have an airbrush, and
Hmm.
so now everything is uh, hand painted oil paints. But the two commissions that I've done where people wanted, something that was similar to, went very well. They were actually very excited. So I was pleased that they were a little open to a little bit of a different look, and two, that I was still able to pull off something that stayed within the confines of what they wanted. So
Great, great.
yeah.
So, what would you say is the best art related advice that you've been given, and who gave it to you?
Um, Something that I knew instinctively as an illustrator, and then was reiterated to me as when I became a fine artist, was if the painting needs something, take something out, because usually it's too busy. And that in illustration, if you put way too much time into the background, then pretty soon the main character in the front was being eclipsed. I instinctively kind of figured that out over time. And then when I started fine art, I went back to my old ways of, I'll just make everything, finish everything. It's gonna, everything has to be full of detail, and then sometimes include too much. And people would go, really, if the painting was about that mountain, it would be a much better painting. You don't really need the road, the farmhouse, and so that's meant a lot. It sort of simplified my life in some respects, and it made for better paintings.
Yeah, that's really great advice. I've never heard that before, but it makes a ton of sense, even to me who has no idea how to do any of
Yeah,
that.
yeah. It was another fine artist, a guy named Ned Jacobs, who told me that. But I mean, it's sort of a mantra with a number of painters that I'm close friends with, because we were all influenced by him.
So outside of, you said you do the art shows and such, are you working on anything currently? Just fun for yourself? Just playing around?
No, at the moment, I've got a 4 foot by 5 foot canvas, big New Mexico landscape. It's supposed to go in the lobby of a new hotel here in Santa Fe, and I'm feeling overwhelmed by the size of the thing.
Mm.
It, I, I could barely fit it in my studio, and yeah, I'm working on it, but it's like, wow, this is
Is
gonna
that
take forever.
is that the biggest you've worked, size wise, you've worked
Yeah,
with?
yeah. I did one just slightly smaller than that, um, but this one's a little more complicated. It's a specific spot here. It's Diablo Canyon, which kind of fits, I guess, my background in terms of the name of the place at the very least. And it's fairly specific, and it can't cover the whole thing with clouds, which is sort of my big thing is to paint clouds. But this time I actually have to put that canyon in there. So
Sounds like it could be a full moon movie.
yeah, exactly.
So, Lee, a question I like to ask everyone near the end here is, have you ever had an experience that you would consider supernatural, paranormal, or encountered an event you can't explain?
Gosh, nothing off the top of my head. The closest things have been coincidences,
Mm-hmm.
where, running into a person I know in the last place I would ever expect to run into that person. But that kind of thing. But other than that, I don't think so. I mean, there's been bumps in the night that I can't make any, what made that noise kind of thing. And I've never figured that out. But other than that, no.
What are your thoughts on that sort of thing? Do you consider yourself, open to the idea, religious or spiritual or anything?
I don't discount it.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it hasn't happened to me doesn't mean it didn't happen to others.
Right.
So, yeah, and if and I, kind of wish or hope that there is some stuff like that because that's always been kind of the stuff that I've enjoyed reading and illustrating. So, you know,
Makes
you
things
want,
more interesting.
yeah, you want something out there to go bump in the night.
Well, Lee, just to put a bow on this thing here, man, is there anything on the horizon you want to share? I know anything you want to put out there, promote, any shows coming up?
Uh, let's see. I'm currently in there's a show up in Montana, Oil Painters of America, Western Division. So that's all the states in America that they consider Western. I have a painting in that I'm pretty pleased with. I'm and also excited to have gotten in, especially when I look at the other work that got in and I'm going, how did I get in this thing anyway? But so but it's but that's about it at the moment. And it'll and yeah, so
Awesome.
looking
Lee,
forward to entering shows in the future and seeing how things go. But
yeah,
that's the big one that's currently going on.
Lee, thank you so much for giving me some of your time, man. Had a great time chatting with you. I hope I didn't keep you too long
Yeah.
or bore you
No,
or
no,
anything
no.
like that.
This was great. Thank you.